Mary Verghese left an extraordinary legacy. She was one of Dr. Ida Scudder's students studying obstetrics at the Christian Medical College in Vellore, South India. Ignoring the advice of her family, who thought medicine an unsuitable career for a woman, she was spirited, feisty, a young woman campaigning for Indian independence under Gandhi. In 1954, on the anniversary of Gandhi's assassination, she and medical colleagues set out for a picnic near a rural hospital at Gudiatham. An accident was to change her life forever. Overtaking a bus, their vehicle hit a milestone and overturned. Mary was initially thought to be dead. Her face was crushed, and spinal injuries meant she had no sensation or movement from her waist down. Multiple operations followed. The loss was devastating. She was in pain and mental anguish. Dr. Ida's daily visits brought her some relief, but hopes of being an obstetrician were clearly finished. Dr. Paul Brand was the surgeon who had first attended Mary when she was brought in on the stretcher. Months later, he visited her in hospital. "It's time to talk about your future as a doctor," he said. What future? Dr. Brand was famous for his work with leprosy, a disease which destroys sensation. Patients can walk on burning coals or glass and not feel pain. Pain warns us when we are in danger, he taught. It is a gift. Without it, injuries and disfigurement result. Mary had had haunting childhood memories of people with leprosy, bandaged hands and feet and eaten away faces, people crying out for food at the garden gate. Leprosy was surrounded by prejudice, superstition, poverty, and dread. To some extent, it still is. The road would empty at the sound of bells as stricken figures appeared. It was very common in Vellore, and in training with Dr. Ida, Mary saw such patients at roadside clinics. Gradually, they became recognisable, with names and personalities. People needing reassurance and compassion, as well as treatment. Paul Brand invited Mary to observe his work, deftly transplanting the tendons in the patient's clawed hands, creating hands that would be useful again. At his clinic, fitted with a perspex jacket to support her spine in sweltering heat, she watched him operate. This was his theatre. Mary still had the use of her own hands. A seed of possibility was sown, heightened by the awareness that this surgery had to be performed from a sitting position. The perspex jacket enabled Mary to sit, and she was able to assist at the operations. and later to perform and even improve upon the procedure. Dedicated to this work, it took much persuasion for her to leave it for a while to attend to her own further rehabilitation in Australia. But it was here that she was to discover the possibilities for the empowerment and independence of people with disabilities. Here she saw people walking with braces and getting around in wheelchairs. She explored if these could be made of cheaper materials and adapted to be used in India. Much later, back at work in Vellore, a plastic surgeon from the States visited Mary. After watching her operate, he was shocked when Mary removed her mask, revealing her grossly disfigured face. He offered her the chance of plastic surgery in the States. She went, and whilst there, she learned more from the doctors and the psychologists and the other professionals who worked in multidisciplinary teams. She further explored orthopaedic appliances. In 1962, she was able to establish the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation in Vellore, the first in India. Of course, leprosy was only one cause of disability. Besides strokes and other diseases, injuries were very common, as Mary knew only too well. Safety can be given low priority. Buildings collapse, bridges fall down, loose electric wires in abundance hang down in streets. Maintenance is not always carried out. During one of our visits, a train derailed, ploughing into a crowd of people watching fireworks at a Hindu festival. There was a fire in an illegal multi-storey market. When the fire engine arrived, it was discovered that there was no water in its tank. And in visiting a hospital in Ranipet, we found the staff coping with horrendous consequences of an accident. Migrant workers had been sleeping under a tank of chemicals in a tannery and had drowned when it burst. These boys fool around as they paint our flats. I turned my camera away, lest their frivolous showing off led to a fall. Half the hospital beds in India are taken up by road victims. Not everyone keeps to the right side of the road, even on dual carriageways. The roads are chaotic. Big vehicles rule. Horns blare continuously. Many buses and trucks are not roadworthy. And few people wear safety belts. Roads are crowded with heavy, overladen lorries. Cars, motorbikes, rickshaws and pedal cyclists. Old men and sometimes children drive the bullock carts, heavy with sand. Cows mingle in the traffic. There are few pavements, and pedestrians have to negotiate the cow dung and the rubble and potholes at the side of the road. These road scenes illustrate more of the dangers. You are either the quick or the dead when you cross the road outside CMC Main Hospital. That's what they say. Auto rickshaws are inherently unstable. And families of 4 or even 5 share a motorbike, helmets being a rarity. One of the hospital chaplains asked me to visit a primary school where he was applying for a place for his 7-year-old. Learning that yet another chaplain would accompany us, I asked how we'd get there. "We have a vehicle," he replied, "a motorbike, and I was to travel side saddle with 2 grown men and a 7-year-old child. It was not for me. Travelling between Vellore and the leprosy hospital at Carrigiri, we go over a level crossing. The railway is 4 tracks wide. It's the main line from Chennai to Bangalore and Kerala. As the barrier closes, taxi drivers usually speed up to squeeze underneath. Then pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists ignore it, ducking underneath. We have seen buses locked together across the tracks. A lorry similar to this one, loaded high with bricks, overturned on the road outside our flat. 5 people died, 3 of whom had been sitting on top of the bricks. In villages far from a service station, petrol may be sold in glass bottles, stood in the sun at 40 degrees. Taxis are not allowed to park inside CMC hospital grounds, so their drivers wait to intercept potential customers, who then have to wait whilst the drivers fetch their vehicles. Well, once, having waited more than 40 minutes, we went in search of the taxi, only to discover 3 drivers had been sharing 1 battery, and our driver was in the process of transferring it to his car. On a sombre note, one early morning whilst in chaplaincy, I was drawn to an old woman sobbing inconsolably and lying prostrate on the cold marble floor of the chapel. A younger woman, also distraught, laid her naked baby on the floor and was praying before the altar. What had happened to arouse such grief? Despite no common language, the women urged me to pray with them. The young woman then told me to follow her, and we made our way through the crowds to the neurosurgery ward, where her husband lay semi-conscious. He had severe head injuries. His motorbike had collided with a lorry carrying bricks. The young Hindu wife took the cross I was wearing and laid it on his forehead. The need for a rehabilitation unit is even more important 60 years on. CMC's Rehabilitation Institute now has 100 beds and treats over 1,000 patients a year. Patients with spinal cord injuries, strokes, brain injuries, amputees, and children with cerebral palsy. It is increasingly high-tech. Robotics in rehab are not a distant dream. The Institute is now recognized by the World Health Organization as a center of competence, high standards, integrity, and compassionate care. Patients often stay many months, nursed by relatives who are provided with a basic kitchen where they can prepare food. And there are 4 very special bungalows. The traditional floor is hardened with cow dung, and here people are taught how to manage life after being discharged. New skills are needed, some less obvious, like how to get on a bus. Mary Verghese may never have realized how powerfully her own disability provided a framework for her patients to see themselves and their own possibilities. Dr. Paul Brand wrote, "They see someone more paralysed than they will ever be, with more disability than they will ever have. They see, too, that she's won through to a high degree of skill." Late one afternoon, Dr. Sushil from the Low-Cost Effective Care Unit took us to rehab to meet Edward, a painter and an electrician from the old town. He had fallen from his ladder, critically injuring his neck. Now quadriplegic, he could only move 2 fingers. He and his young wife, Bobine, their 2 children, both under 3, and his elderly mother and brother all lived in a small thatched house in the old town. He now had no income, and his wife would bring in no income because she would need to give 24-hour nursing. He could no longer support and care for his children. "How can I be a father?" he wept. His despair was palpable. As an active Christian, he sought prayer, and he went through many months of rehabilitation, slowly regaining the will to live. Edward's church was given money by a foreign donor, and the family able to replace the mud home with a concrete house, just 2 rooms and a small cemented area in front of the entrance. He learned to use a wheelchair, and we enabled a ramp to be made across the sewer onto the roadway outside. A multidisciplinary team supported him and his family towards rehabilitation, providing daily food and guaranteeing the children's future education. With the help of CNC, and with his own great determination and using just his 2 fingers, Edward began a mobile phone business from home, recharging accounts. The hospital believes that restoring independence and financial security is a crucial part of rehabilitation. Dr. Saranjan, on the left, was in charge of physical medicine and rehab for nearly 30 years. It was extremely difficult for many patients to come for regular follow-up. But Saranjan pioneered an innovative annual Mela, a 3-day festival bringing together former patients and their families. This is Edward today. He is now a member of the organising committee. These annual reunions serve to provide networking and peer support. They have now become a model serving the differently abled in other parts of India. A huge marquee provides accommodation with a platform of sand and plastic sheeting to create a mattress for people to sleep on. 300 people attend, receiving medical checkups and taking part in cultural, educational and entertainment programs. In small groups, every aspect of life is discussed. Physical, practical, emotional, sexual, and spiritual. The atmosphere is both of medical camp and a party. Friendships mushroom as stories of survival and achievement are shared. The Mela has a buzz and life of its own. It culminates in evening discos, barbecues, music and drama. Old friends from the past meet up. Amidst the glare of stage lights, we watched Sujatha dance. Afterwards, we talked with her. Lithe, beautiful, athletic. She's a teacher in a government school in a poor rural area. Apart from subjects like history and geography, she teaches classical dancing, which the children perform at school functions. She makes their costumes. Her concern is for the marginalised and disadvantaged. Mesmerised by the impact of her dance, we were not conscious that she had no arms. Dr. Guru then introduced us to Suresh, an art therapist at rehab. He's also an insurance agent and financial advisor. Suresh was born with muscular dystrophy, and apart from his voice and his outgoing personality, he too has only the use of 2 fingers. He has long been Sujatha's mentor. One day, Dr. Guru was exploring what Sujatha wanted to achieve in life. She told him it was to be a teacher. Suresh had taught her to paint and to write, and he now encouraged her at every stage of new training. The children she teaches today see her writing on the blackboard with her feet. Suresh's art therapy continues at rehab, mostly with children's classes. It's clear we need to rethink definitions and labels and how we identify people with disability. Suresh is a man of many gifts, not least his ability to inspire confidence in others. He radiates a warmth and an inclusiveness, a maturity that comes with life experience. A highlight of the Mila is the sports event, the tug of war, wheelchair races, a cricket match, wheelchair, basketball, and much, much more. Attending the Rehab Mila in February 2020 was one of the very last things we did before returning to the UK. Always, it is an amazing privilege. The following video captures some of the atmosphere.
வீடியோ எடுக்கிறானம்மா யாரு அவள் நீ ஃபாரின்லாம் போகிறப்ப நீ போடலாம்
Italy?
Yeah, Italy.
Hello.
Hello there. So Edwin's son is from chaplaincy, going to take this morning service.
You must know Deborah.
And Dr. Guru, who's been working in rehab for so many years. We're just about to have the service, the morning service, and after that they'll split up into groups. And this is the program. Spinal cord injury Mila, you are special, and it asks the questions, how are you special? It also asks how you overcome the obstacles, and how do you need God's help in moving forward.
My wife.
That's your wife?
My wife.
Video.
Okay. திரும்பி உட்கார்ந்துங்க. எடிட் செலக்ட் பண்ணுவாங்க. Group 3. மகேஸ்வரி. Group 4. Group 4.
We're preparing now. They're calling out group numbers for people who, so they can meet after the service. And they're already going to those groups before the service.
எங்களுக்கு தந்திருக்கக்கூடிய எல்லா நன்மைகளுக்காகவும் நன்றி சொல்லுகின்றோம். அருமையான இந்த காலை வேளை கூட எங்கள் யாவருக்கும் மிகுந்த
பாதி ஓட்டுருக்கோம் எடுங்க அது காயுது அப்படியே ஓட்டாதீங்கம்மா பாதி ஓட்டுங்க இது அங்க ஏன் ஓட்டிடு
இது வந்து ஒரு தண்ணி ரொட்டேட் பண்ணி பூமியில இருந்து தண்ணி எடுக்கிற மாதிரி.
It is something like which you can take water out of from the earth.
Take water from the earth.
Yeah.
For the plants.
Yeah, planet or for even drinking.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well done. Lovely.
Yes.
Marvelous. A lamp made.
ஒரு மணி நேரத்துல
Really beautiful.
சரி இன்னும் ஒரு 10 minutes.
சுறாமீன் வந்தா கூட கட் பண்ணிடுவோம். நாங்க சார் வெட்டி கப்பல் ரெடி. பேப்பர் ஏதாவது பேப்பர் ஒரு நிறைய ஃபுட் செய்யலாம்.
எங்க குரூப் டிசைன்லாம் நாங்க பண்ணிருக்கோம் பாருங்க எல்லாரும். இதை வச்சு நம்ம வந்து வீட்டுல இருந்து ஒரு கடல்ல ஒரு ஃப்ரண்ட்ல ஒரு அட்வர்டைஸ்மெண்ட்.
How are you? Yes, I am fine. Thank you. My name is Nedin Chelian, coming from Chindi.
Doesn't even have to look at that.
Garlic. Smells good. Thank you. Nandri.
Very good. ஓடலாம் மறுபடியும் ஓய்பால் போயிடுச்சு நமக்கு நல்லா தெரியுது. போகல ஒயிட் போயிருக்கு போரு கிடையாது. அம்பையர் கரெக்டாக வந்து அவுட் கொடுக்கல. மேட்ச் எல்லாம் வந்து ஒரு பக்கம் அப்படியே திருவிழா இருக்கிறது. அதாவது வந்து ஃபீல்டிங் வந்து ரொம்ப சூப்பராக பண்ணுறாங்க, போலிங்கும் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் கிளாஸாக பண்ணுறாங்க. ஆனால் நம்ம பீட்டிங் வந்து நிறைய ஒயிட் பால் போட்டது காரணத்தினால எந்த அடிக்கணும். ஆனால் 2 ஓவர் 12 பால் இருக்கு, தாராளமாக அடிக்கலாம். அதாவது வந்து தாராளமாக அடிக்கலாம். கண்டிப்பாக பேட்டிங் ஆட வேண்டிய எதிர்பார்க்க இருக்கணும், இறங்கி வந்து அடிக்கணும். இல்லைனாக்க வந்து
Son's working in a multinational company in Bangalore. Daughter's a nurse. He had an accident 28 years ago, fell from a mango tree. His wife, she's nursed him through 28 years.
Shifas, Kerala. So good.
Come on! Super, man, super.
This man 11 years ago became injured through an electric shock. He tells me that 2 years ago he became diabetic. His wife here, and he's eating the beans, lentils. It's very healthy for you. Diabetic, good. In this man's family, 4 people have been affected by muscular dystrophy. He is the 4th. Only his father is a healthy person, and he looks after the other 4, including his mother. Hi.
15 years they were ஒண்ணா இருக்காங்க. அவங்க ஹஸ்பண்ட் வந்துட்டு டயபெட்டிஸ்ல ட்ரெயின் ஆனங்காட்டி இங்க இருக்க டாக்டர்ஸ் அவங்க எல்லாம் ட்ரெயின் பண்றதுக்காக இங்கிலாந்துல இருந்து வந்திருக்காங்க.
Because of this guy, the son. He is not coming there often. And we are getting off.
So these are the prizes.
எடுக்கிறது வந்து ஒரு பக்கம் வந்து போக வேண்டியதாக இருக்கு இல்லையா?
Second place goes to Selvadansan.
Welcome.
Hospital is very great. Good. I like to hospital.
Yes.
I like to rehab.
Bye.
Bye. A very hot and dusty day ends, and the people return to their tent at rehab. In every campus of CMC Hospital, there is a chapel. Here you can see Rehab's chapel under construction. A woman brings a gift of homemade sweets, grateful for the care Dr. Jacob George and the staff have given her husband. Now complete, Rehabilitation's chapel is unique. It was envisaged to provide inspiration and encourage faith in people who had undergone life-altering situations. A sacred space for people who were in crisis, knowing suffering perhaps beyond the realm of our own human understanding. An inclusive space, one that could speak of peace and strength, a place of hope and unconditional love. The glass window of the prodigal, embraced by his father, depicts the great love of God. Another modern stained glass window shows Jesus carrying his cross. Carrying, not sinking under the weight of it. The chapel was designed with incomplete walls, 3 arcs of concrete, each overlapping. Something beautiful, made out of the incomplete, with large gaps between the walls to form entrances. Significantly, no doors block access, either to the chapel or indeed to the possibilities that faith opens. No block whatsoever, even when all seems lost. The encircling walls evoke a protective spiritual place, shielded from trauma and suffering. This chapel reflects Mary the Jesus' own life. She came to understand that though she had lost half her body, life could still be whole. In dedicating her life to Christ in the care of others, she was to find it again, a life of compassion. From the time Dr. Brand commandeered her to work on the reconstruction of the hands of leprosy patients, Mary's own life was renewed. Her vocation as a doctor simply took a different course. Her own hands were to become the instruments of healing. Mary would often muse over the words of a favourite hymn. Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to thee. Take my hands and let them move at the impulse of thy love. Take myself, and I will be ever, only, all for thee. I close with a meditation from the Church of the Saviour in Washington, D.C., where I spent some time. Christ meets us in our hunger to give us the bread of life. Christ meets us in our pain to give us a call, a dream for healing and radical change. Christ meets us in his body to transform and accompany us on the journey. Christ sends us out in joyful expectation to be with him as bread for the world. Let us go in God's strength and peace this day.